The news hit like thunder at noon. Denzel Washington sat on a leather chair in his home office, reviewing lines for a documentary voiceover, when his assistant Maya burst in, her face pale and trembling. "It's CNN," she said, handing him her phone. "It's everywhere." Denzel took the phone slowly. The headline stared back at him in bold. Burning letters. Senator John Kennedy files $80 million lawsuit against Denzel Washington. Defamation and damages. For a few seconds, there was nothing, no reaction. Only the sound of rain tapping against the tall windows. Denzel's eyes narrowed, not in confusion, but in a quiet recognition of something he'd always known was coming. He had spoken truth on television just 3 nights ago. Nothing personal, just facts. He had pointed to what he believed were inconsistencies in Senate hearings, selective outrage in politics, and double standards that hurt the American people. The clip had gone viral, crossing 10 million views in less than 48 hours. But now this. "They're saying you damaged his legacy," Maya whispered, barely able to speak. "They're accusing you of attacking his family history, his father's name." Denzel didn't move, his jaw clenched. "So this is how it starts," he murmured, eyes still on the screen, not with a debate, not with reason, but with a lawsuit. Across Washington, reporters scrambled. The White House press secretary was blindsided. Senate members refused comment. On MSNBC, Fox, and even late-night talk shows, the story swallowed everything else. But the question on every American's mind wasn't about the lawsuit. It was about how Denzel would respond. And that answer came faster than anyone expected. Less than 6 hours after the CNN alert, Denzel stood before cameras at a packed press conference in Los Angeles. Not his team, not a lawyer, Denzel himself. No suit, no tie, just a calm, composed man in a gray sweater, staring into the flashing cameras like a storm was already inside him and he was holding it back. "I read the lawsuit," he began. "I know what it says. And I want you to know this. I didn't attack a man. I criticized his system. And if a senator sees truth as defamation, then maybe it's time we looked harder at what we're defending." Gasps echoed through the room. Reporters froze. "I'm not going to hide behind lawyers," he continued. "I'll stand in court. I'll answer every question. But I will not apologize for telling the truth." Maya stood off stage, tears in her eyes. She knew what this meant. The Hollywood actor beloved by millions had just declared war on silence, on politics as usual, on a system built to punish the outspoken, and the backlash was immediate. Within 24 hours, Denzel's contracts with 2 major studios were under review. Sponsors pulled back. A major awards ceremony removed him from the presenter list. Suddenly, the man who had stood tall in Training Day and Glory now stood alone. On the Senate floor, Senator Kennedy gave a fiery speech. "This isn't about silencing anyone," he claimed. "This is about accountability, Mr." Washington's words were reckless, dangerous, and disrespectful to the American institution. But not everyone bought it. Social media exploded. Thousands defended Denzel. Others demanded proof. Hashtags like #TruthVSKennedy and #IST, and with Denzel began trending. Still, the most intense reactions came from inside Hollywood. One anonymous executive texted a journalist, "He's finished. They'll make an example out of him." Behind closed doors, Denzel sat with his lawyer, Jared Bluma Sharp, young civil rights attorney with a reputation for exposing political corruption. "They want you to fold," Jared said. "Settle, disappear. But if you fight, really fight, we'll need everything. Emails, footage, character witnesses, even Senate records." "Do it," Denzel replied without hesitation. Then he leaned forward. "I want my deposition on live TV, no edits. Let the people see the truth in real time." Jared blinked. "You want to testify, leave?" "Yes," Denzel said quietly. "If this is about truth, Then let's tell it where no one can twist it. And with that, the most watched courtroom battle in recent memory was set into motion. But the real twist didn't come until the night before the first hearing. A former Senate aide anonymous, scared and trembling, left a voicemail on Jared Bloom's phone. "I know things," she said. "Things the senator's hiding, about campaign money, about files sealed during the Ethics Committee review. I saw it all. And if Denzel testifies, they'll bury him just like they buried others. I have proof, but I need protection first." Jared played the message twice. Then he looked at Denzel and whispered the words that changed everything. This isn't just about a speech anymore. This goes way deeper. You just stepped into something bigger than you imagined." And Denzel, calm as ever, simply said, "Good, because maybe it's time someone did." The courthouse buzzed like a hornet's nest. Outside, hundreds stood behind barricades, some holding signs of support, others demanding Denzel's accountability. The air smelled of coffee, sweat, and heavy rain. Media vans lined the streets, and every major network was live. Inside courtroom 7A, the atmosphere was even thicker. The judge, a seasoned woman named Lena Morales, known for her zero-tolerance attitude toward theatrics, sat poised on the bench. The prosecution team whispered amongst themselves, faces tight and rehearsed. Denzel Washington sat silently in the front row beside Jared Bloom. He didn't glance around. He just stared forward, still calm, but sharp. Then the door opened. And everything changed. The prosecution called their first witness, but it wasn't Denzel. It was Cassidy Rayner. The woman from the voicemail. Every reporter in the room jolted upright. Cassidy walked slowly, clutching her bag to her chest. Mid-30s, glasses, her expression unreadable. Once a low-profile Senate aide, she was now the center of a firestorm she hadn't asked for. The court watched in stunned silence as she was sworn in. Judge Morales leaned forward. "Miss Rayner, do you understand the implications of your testimony?" Cassidy nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The prosecutor stepped forward. "Miss Rayner, please explain to the court your connection to Senator Kennedy." "I worked for him," she said, voice steady but low. "I was on his staff for 3 years. I helped manage public communications, research, and sensitive documentation." "And what led you to come forward?" Cassidy glanced at Denzel. Then she looked back at the judge. "Because I know this lawsuit isn't about defamation. It's about silencing a voice that got too close to the truth." The courtroom gasped. Someone dropped a pen. "Objection!" The prosecution shouted. "Overruled," Judge Morales said firmly. "Continue." Cassidy took a breath. The night after Denzel's interview aired, I was contacted by Senator Kennedy's legal advisor. They were panicking, not because Denzel had lied, but because he had unknowingly referenced files that were part of a sealed ethics investigation from years ago. Files I helped prepare. The room went dead quiet. "You're saying the senator is using this lawsuit to distract from a hidden ethics scandal?" Jared asked, standing slowly. Cassidy nodded. "Yes." Denzel didn't know it, but some of the things he said in that interview about campaign donations, about influence peddling, they matched word-for-word details from the sealed report. Jared turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we request immediate access to those sealed documents." "They're classified," the prosecution snapped. "Not anymore," Cassidy said, reaching into her bag. "Because I made copies, and I'm submitting them under federal whistleblower protections." She held up a flash drive. Judge Morales's face changed. She tapped her gavel once. "Court will recess for 20 minutes. Both parties will review the documents in chambers. Mr. Washington, please remain seated." As everyone rose in stunned motion, Denzel stayed still. He leaned toward Jared and said quietly, "They thought I came unarmed." Jared smiled faintly. "They're about to learn otherwise." 20 minutes later, the courtroom reopened. The Atmosphere had shifted. Journalists looked shaken. One of Senator Kennedy's aides was seen exiting the courthouse, face buried in their hands. Judge Morales returned, face unreadable. She addressed the court. The contents of the documents, submitted by Miss Rayner, are now part of the public record under whistleblower protections. The court recognizes their relevance to the motivations behind this lawsuit. We will proceed. Cassidy stepped down from the stand. The prosecution's next move? They called Senator Kennedy himself. He entered from a private hallway, surrounded by security, face rigid. No smiles, no nods to the gallery. Only eyes like ice. He took the stand like a general entering enemy territory. Jared stood for questioning. Senator, he began smoothly, were you aware that elements of Mr. Washington's statements closely reflected parts of your sealed ethics investigation? Kennedy narrowed his eyes. Those documents should never have been released, but they were accurate? Kennedy paused. Irrelevant. Sir, did you file this lawsuit after discovering that his statements mirrored elements from those sealed findings? Silence. Or is it true that you feared public scrutiny would force a reopening of your ethics review? Kennedy clenched his jaw. This is a defamation trial, not a Senate hearing. Jared smiled coldly. Then why does your entire case collapse if the public learns what's in those files? Objection. Sustained. But the damage was done. Every camera captured the moment Senator Kennedy cracked. A bead of sweat ran down his cheek. A flicker of fear, just enough for the world to see. Outside the courthouse, social media exploded. Hashtag Kennedy Files, hashtag Denzel Truth, Open Ethics News anchors. Previously neutral, now leaned toward suspicion. One analyst said on air, this might be the biggest political miscalculation in years. Back at Denzel's home, Maya watched from the couch, her phone blowing up with messages from reporters, lawyers and celebrities alike. Denzel walked in. Slowly, silent as always. You're winning, Maya said. No, Denzel replied. I'm not here to win. I'm here to reveal. And the next day, he finally took the stand. Courtroom 7 fell silent again as Denzel walked to the witness chair. No bodyguards, no lawyer at his side. Just him. He raised his right hand, was sworn in, and sat down. Mr. Washington, the prosecutor began. Do you deny referring to Senator Kennedy in your interview? No, Denzel said simply. I never used his name. But the truth hit too close to him, and that's why we're here. Did you intend to damage his reputation? No, I intended to protect the people who don't get invited into the rooms where deals are made. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. You're saying this was about justice? I'm saying this was about memory, Denzel said. Because America forgets fast. And if you don't stop and say something when the cameras are on you, you're part of the silence. And silence kills truth. Then came the moment that made history. Jared rose, holding a small envelope. Your Honor, he said, with Mr. Washington's permission, I'd like to submit this as sealed letter written to him after the interview aired from a current member of Congress. He handed it to the clerk. Judge Morales opened it and read silently. She looked up, eyes slightly wider than before, and she said, the content of this letter confirms the existence of bipartisan concern over Senator Kennedy's history. Court will recess until tomorrow for further review. As everyone scrambled again, Denzel looked out at the crowd. And for the first time in days, he smiled. The storm broke just before sunrise. Someone leaked the documents. The whistleblower files, once locked inside federal archives and ethics subcommittees, now spread like wildfire through newsrooms, blogs, and social platforms. What had been whispers became headlines, and the headlines were damning. Secret campaign slush fund tied to Senator Kennedy, revealed in court leak. Ethics watchdog. Documents show pattern of hidden donors and false declarations. Actors. Lawsuit opens a political Pandora's box. Senate in crisis. Outside Capitol Hill, protesters formed by 9 a.m. young staffers stood behind office windows, pale and stunned. Kennedy's inner circle scrambled for damage control, releasing a statement that blamed deep fake tactics and desperate conspiracy theorists. But it was too late. The files were real, and Denzel? He had become something else entirely. Not just an actor, not just a defendant. He was now a national reckoning in human form. Still, inside his team's private suite, tension cut like broken glass. Maya sat by the window, her coffee untouched. Jared paced. And Denzel? He just stared at the television, where 5 different channels replayed his court testimony on loop. "This is it," Jared muttered. "This changes everything. Senate hearings might reopen. The Department of Justice could move in. You're not on trial anymore, Denzel." "He is," but Denzel didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the screen, his mind elsewhere. Maya finally said, "Do you think Cassidy leaked the documents?" "No," Denzel answered slowly. She was terrified. She wanted protection. She wouldn't risk this unless she had cover. Then his phone buzzed. One message. No name. Just 5 words. "You don't know your friends." He stared at it. Jared noticed. "What is it?" Denzel showed him the screen. The room went silent. Later that evening, while Jared reviewed court strategy, Maya left to get some air. But she didn't go far. In a dim parking garage 2 blocks from the courthouse, she stepped into a black sedan. Inside waited a man in a long coat, his face hidden behind tinted glasses. Maya handed over a small chip drive. "It's done," she whispered. "Everything they talked about. It's all on here. Audio, transcripts, his whole play." The man nodded. "You've done well. And your account has been credited. You'll protect me if this goes wrong, right?" she asked, fear slipping into her voice. The man said nothing. He just drove off. And Maya didn't look back. The next morning, court resumed. The air was different now. Charged, dangerous. Journalists packed every seat. Secret Service agents stood quietly near the door. Denzel walked in like before, steady, focused, unreadable. But something in his eyes had changed. He knew something was off, and when he took the stand again, the trap was already waiting. The prosecution began by showing a new video, allegedly leaked footage of Denzel in a private meeting with Jared and Cassidy Rayner. It was grainy, but it showed a moment where Denzel said, "We pushed this story just right, and the public will forget the truth. They'll remember the moment." Gasps filled the courtroom. Jared stood instantly. "Objection! This is a doctored clip," but it was too late. Judge Morales raised an eyebrow. "We'll allow temporary submission for evaluation." The prosecution leaned forward. "Mr. Washington, is this your voice?" "Yes," he said quietly. "And did you say these words?" "Yes, but thank you. No further questions." Denzel stared down. He knew exactly what this was. Context removed. Motive twisted. The line was from a strategy session discussing how to defend the truth, not manipulate it. But that part? Cut. Outside the courthouse, the video had already gone viral. People who once stood with him now hesitated. Even some of his supporters on cable news began to hedge their words. "If this is true," one anchor said, "then Denzel may have crossed a line he can't walk back." That night, Maya avoided eye contact. She sat across from Denzel in their hotel suite, her laptop open, fingers trembling slightly. "There. Spinning it," she said. "Hard. Every outlet, every angle." Denzel didn't answer. Instead, he looked her in the eye and said one thing. "Where were you last night?" Maya froze. "What?" "I tracked your card. Not because I don't trust you, because I had to. You said you were walking, but your signal went dark right next to the parking garage across from 5th Street. Maya's mouth went dry. "Denzel, I've had people betray me before," he said, voice low. "But never someone I let into my home, into my life." Tears filled her eyes. But Denzel stood up. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "We're done." And he walked out. The betrayal shook him, but it didn't break him. Because the next morning, Denzel made one final move. He walked into court, not with Jared, but with Cassidy Rayner at his side. And in her hand, a laptop. "Your Honor," Cassidy said, standing beside the defense table. "With permission, I'd like to play the full video from that strategy meeting, the unedited version." Judge Morales nodded. And in front of a packed courtroom, the truth unfolded. On the screen, Denzel's full words were finally heard. "We pushed this story just right, not to lie, but to give people a moment of clarity. They forget the numbers, the transcripts, but they remember the human story. That's how we defend the truth. That's how we keep them watching long enough to care." Silence. Then, gasps. Then a wave of realization. It had been edited, twisted, used against him. And the court saw it. Judge Morales looked at the prosecution. "Your credibility is in question. I will call for a recess, and I advise you to reconsider your entire approach." Denzel didn't gloat. He just sat back and exhaled. It happened with no warning. Judge Morales had just called for the mid-morning session to resume. Cameras rolled. Denzel sat calmly with Jared and Cassidy, while Senator Kennedy whispered furiously with his attorneys. Everyone expected another round of back-and-forth arguments, maybe a forensic expert, maybe more media spin. Instead, the courtroom doors opened, and Marcus Wade walked in. Gasps, murmurs. One juror even covered their mouth. Marcus Wade wasn't just any aide. He had been Kennedy's right hand, the man trusted with off-the-record strategy, political maneuvering, and campaign back channels. He had disappeared months earlier. Rumors said he'd taken a sabbatical for health reasons. But now here he was, walking slowly, carrying a box in his arms. Eyes tired but focused. He approached the front and said 4 words that froze the entire room. "I request to testify." Judge Morales looked at him for a long moment. "On whose behalf?" Marcus looked directly at Denzel. "On behalf of the truth." The prosecution objected immediately. They hadn't been warned. They said the testimony was irrelevant, unvetted, unapproved. But the judge was done with delays. She allowed it. And so Marcus took the stand. Cassidy stared, her hands clenched. Jared leaned forward, sensing something big. Denzel remained unreadable, but his eyes didn't blink. "Mr. Wade," Jared began, "can you tell the court why you've come forward now?" Marcus inhaled slowly. "Because I was part of the machine. The cover-ups, the spin, the manipulation of donors, the silencing of voices. I helped build the wall that protected Senator Kennedy from the consequences of his actions." Gasps again. Someone in the press row whispered, "This just flipped the trial." "And what made you walk away?" Jared asked. "Guilt," Marcus said, "and something else." He reached into the box and pulled out a burned CD, labeled only with the word "Conference." "What's on that disc?" Jared asked. "An off-record meeting that Senator Kennedy had with private energy executives. It proves he made promises in exchange for dark money right before he went after Denzel." "How is that relevant to this trial?" Marcus's voice hardened. "Because that meeting happened the same night Denzel gave his interview. And Kennedy knew what was coming. This lawsuit wasn't about defamation. It was a smokescreen. A preemptive strike to bury a man before he could light a match." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel furiously, demanding silence. Outside, news anchors scrambled to adjust live coverage. Phones buzzed. The Senate chamber lit up in emergency back-channel calls. Kennedy's lead attorney leaned over and whispered, "We need a break. Now." But it was too late. Jared took the disc from Marcus and handed it to the court clerk. "Your Honor," he said, "we request this audio be played now for the record, for the jury, and for the public." Morales hesitated, then nodded. And the speakers came to life. At first, it was garbled background noise, papers shuffling. A door closing. Then a voice, Kennedy's unmistakable drawl. "We're handling it. Trust me, that actor, he'll be too busy defending himself to say another damn word about this." A second voicemail replied, "What about the files? They're sealed, and Cassidy's long gone. If anything leaks, we burn it down. Besides, the public loves a scandal. Give him a black celebrity talking too much, and watch how fast they look the other way." That line, those exact words, they exploded like gunpowder in the courtroom. The jury froze. Cassidy flinched. Jared dropped his pen, but it was Denzel's face, calm, quiet, and filled with silent pain that told the entire story. Judge Morales slammed her gavel again. "Court will recess immediately. This recording will be submitted for independent verification." Outside, America exploded. #burn it down. #Kennedy caught. #defend Denzel. Reporters shouted questions. As Marcus exited the courthouse, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The audio spoke louder than any testimony could, and Senator Kennedy. He vanished. No public statement. No comment. No press conference. Just silence. The Senate released a short note saying they had initiated an urgent ethics review based on new evidence submitted under oath. Meanwhile, one of the largest protest marches in recent years formed outside the courthouse by sunset. People from all walks of life, students, veterans, nurses, filmmakers, stood holding signs that read, "Truth doesn't need permission. We believe Denzel." This is bigger than Hollywood. Back in his suite, Denzel sat alone, watching it all unfold. Cassidy knocked and entered quietly. "You okay?" she asked. "No," he said honestly. "But this matters." "It does," she replied. "And it's not over." He nodded slowly. Then he turned to her. "You think the judge will dismiss it now?" Cassidy didn't smile. "No," she said. "I think it's going to trial, real trial. Not just public opinion, and you need to be ready." He stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the crowd gathering beneath the courthouse steps. "Then let's give them something to remember," he whispered. The courtroom was quieter now, but it wasn't peace. It was tension, like everyone was waiting for something to crack. Judge Morales entered, her eyes colder than before. The media glare had reached her doorstep. Senate pressure mounted. The Justice Department was circling. And she knew whatever happened in her courtroom would echo far beyond its walls. But just when things seemed to be falling apart for Senator Kennedy, he returned with a new team of lawyers, a new suit, and a completely different strategy. New lead attorney was no stranger. His name was Pierce Allard, a high-profile fixer known for defending billionaires, politicians, and Hollywood elites. A man with a reputation for flipping the narrative in courtrooms where hope had already died. He walked in like he owned the air, and his strategy attacked Denzel's credibility. Personally. In his opening statement that morning, Pierce stood before the jury and spoke with a voice like silk dipped in venom. "We are not here to debate policy. We are not here to unseal the past. We are here because a man with global influence, Mr. Washington, used that influence to damage the legacy and reputation of a public servant. We will show that this was not an accident, but a calculated, performative strike against a political rival. A man who dared to disagree." Then he paused. And looked directly at Denzel. "This trial is not about truth, it's about power." Gasps, silence, and just like that, he'd flipped the frame. His next move? A surprise witness. Crystal Zayan, actress who once worked on a film with Denzel nearly 20 years ago. Her testimony was vague, but emotional. She claimed Denzel had once tried to manipulate a script rewrite to elevate his role over the political themes of the story, painting him as someone who used platforms for personal glory. It had nothing to do with the lawsuit, but it made. The jury squirmed. Then came a psychologist who spoke about narcissistic traits, common in celebrities. Then a former tabloid editor who claimed Denzel had been obsessed with controlling media narratives. Jared objected over and over, but the damage was intentional. Pierce, Allard wasn't playing the law. He was playing the jury's doubt. Outside, the mood changed. Some pundits began to echo the strategy. Maybe this was all performance, one anchor said. Maybe Denzel just knows how to control a courtroom the way he controls a film set. But in the shadows of the courtroom, something else moved. A woman older, quiet, her hair braided and tucked into a blue shawl. No one noticed her at first, until she stepped forward after the session ended and walked directly toward Denzel, stopping just before security could react. "You don't remember me," she said softly. "But I used to work at the school where your mother taught." Denzel's eyes widened. "Mrs. Ezra?" He whispered. She nodded, then handed him a letter. "She asked me to give you this. She wrote it years ago. Said it was for the day you were truly tested." Denzel's hands shook. He took the envelope and opened it right there, surrounded by silence, cameras, and flashing phones. The letter inside was handwritten, his mother's voice in ink. "If they ever try to turn you into something you're not, don't fight them with anger. Fight them with proof. Because truth doesn't shout. It shows." At the bottom was a name. Nathaniel Kingston. Denzel froze. Jared leaned in. "Who is that?" "A screenwriter," Denzel said. "He wrote that political film 20 years ago. The one they just used against me." "You think he still has the original script?" "I know he does," Denzel replied. "And if Crystal lied about what happened, he'll have the proof." Within hours, Jared's team tracked down Nathaniel. He lived in a small coastal town now, off the grid. But he agreed to talk, and the next morning, he walked into the courtroom carrying a worn leather folder filled with emails, notes, and the original script. Judge Morales approved his appearance. Nathaniel testified under oath. "The story they're twisting? I wrote it with Denzel. He didn't try to make himself bigger. In fact, he pushed for more political depth. He wanted to use that film to make people think, not just feel." Then he held up a printed email from 2 decades ago. "This is from Denzel. It says, quote, 'Let's make this about something bigger than me. Let's tell the truth even if it makes people uncomfortable.'" The courtroom was silent. Crystal Zane's testimony collapsed. Pierce Allard frowned for the first time. In Judge Morales sat straighter in her chair. But just as the tide turned back toward Denzel, Pierce Allard made one final move. He submitted a request to suppress all testimony related to the leaked files, claiming the evidence was illegally obtained and that the whistleblower protections had expired based on a technicality. "You can't be serious," Jared barked. "I'm absolutely serious," Pierce replied. "This is a court of law, not a courtroom drama. And this," Jared shot back, "is a nation watching." Judge Morales promised a ruling the next morning. But that night, something unexpected happened. At 11:32 p.m., a mysterious video dropped online from an unknown account. It showed Senator Kennedy, years earlier, in an off-the-record panel at a private fundraiser. The video was grainy, but the voice was clear. "Truth is what people believe when the camera is rolling. The rest is just rehearsal." The internet exploded. Millions watched. And #TruthIsRehearsal began trending worldwide. In his hotel room, Denzel sat with the letter from his mother resting on the table beside him. Cassidy walked in. "You ready for tomorrow?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I'm prepared." She nodded. Double quotes, "Then hold your line. Because if they take this from you, they take it from all of us." Denzel looked up. And for the first time since the trial began, he said, "Tomorrow, we go all the way." The courtroom was full before sunrise. Dozens had slept outside. Some carried signs. Others just carried hope. Inside, the room felt like a breath held too long. Every bench was packed. News crews overflowed into hallways. Politicians, actors, students, veterans, everyone came. They weren't just watching a trial now. They were watching a line in the sand. Judge Lena Morales entered with calm force. She looked tired, but unshaken. A lifetime of rulings behind her, and one decision now in front of her that the world would remember. She addressed both legal teams. This court has heard arguments, reviewed evidence, and witnessed both legal brilliance and attempts to mislead. Before I rule, each side will have one final statement. Pierce Allard stood first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, deadly. This case is not about corruption or conspiracy, he said. It is about a man, Mr. Washington, who knowingly used his platform to suggest crimes that were never proven. All for personal legacy. This court cannot become a stage for personal theater. Reputation is sacred. And when it is unjustly harmed, the law must step in. He sat. Then Jared stood. But he didn't speak immediately. Instead, he walked slowly to the center of the courtroom, then turned to face the jury. Truth, he began, doesn't always come wearing armor. Sometimes it limps into court after being dragged through lies, betrayal, and fear. But it gets here eventually. He held up a printout of the leaked quote from Senator Kennedy's fundraiser video. Truth is what people believe when the camera is rolling. No, Jared said, voice rising. Truth is what survives when the cameras are turned off. When the deals are made in dark rooms. When whistleblowers risk their safety. When a man stands alone against a machine designed to crush him. Then he pointed at Denzel. He could have settled. He could have backed down. But he chose to fight for every artist, every citizen, every voice that was ever told to sit down and be quiet. The jury stared back, some misty-eyed, some pale. We're not asking you to crown a hero, Jared said. We're asking you to stop the weaponization of silence. He sat. Then came the pause. Judge Morales looked over her notes. The courtroom barely breathed. Before I deliver my ruling, she said, I must share something that just came to the court's attention. Everyone tensed. This morning, the Department of Justice submitted a sealed brief confirming the authenticity of the whistleblower evidence. They also confirmed that the leak came not from the defense, but from an anonymous third-party investigator within the Senate Ethics Committee. Gasps. Therefore, the court rejects the prosecution's request to suppress evidence. The documents remain in play. Pierce Allard leaned back, face blank. Kennedy, sitting behind him, closed his eyes, and then Judge Morales delivered the verdict. In the matter of Senator John Kennedy versus Denzel Washington, she said, the court finds in favor of the defendant. Pandemonium. People cried, shouted, clapped. Security had to hold the crowd back. Outside, fireworks were lit within minutes. People poured into streets, chanting, truth doesn't kneel. We believe Washington wins. Inside, Denzel didn't stand. He didn't cry. He just closed his eyes and exhaled. But the story didn't end there, because as the courtroom emptied, a court officer handed Jared a small envelope. Came by courier, he said. No return address. Jared opened it. Inside was a flash drive and a note that read, you won the trial, now win the war. Play this before you decide what's next. They played it that night. It was footage from a Senate subcommittee room, hidden cameras, buried deep. Kennedy, years earlier, talking with 3 other senators, discussing how to kill a bill meant to expose corporate influence in politics, calling it the real threat. Denzel listened quietly. Jared shook his head. This would take down more than just him. Cassidy looked scared. If you release it, they'll come for you again. Maya, now watching from the sidelines after her betrayal, said nothing. Finally, Jared asked, what do we do? Denzel stared at the screen. Then he turned to them. And said, we release it. But not through a press conference. Through a film. Let people hear it in their own homes. Not from a courtroom. From a story. Let the truth speak in the way it always has. Months later, the documentary premiered, The Line Between Silence, written, directed, and narrated by Denzel Washington. It told the full story of the trial. Of the system. Of the people who risked everything and millions. Watch. In schools. In homes. In halls of power. Senator Kennedy resigned under pressure. Ethics investigations expanded. New laws were proposed. And Denzel? He never ran for office. Never wrote a book. He just returned to what he always did best, telling stories that changed the world. And now, his own had done just that.